Hey, well, welcome to our August 15th, Thursday, August 15th Policy Committee meeting. We are starting at 3:35, and we've got quite a few policies here, and so we'll just jump in. And thank you all for being here, and thank folks who are going to be presenting as well. So we want to start with policies for first reading, and we have two policies there. We have policy 420, students and employees with sexually transmitted infections and diseases and certain other communicable diseases and infectious conditions. And this policy is going to replace 4055, 4065, and 5130. And the purpose of this policy, and this is a new policy, is public concern that students and staff of the school district be able to attend the schools of the district without becoming infected with serious communicable or infectious diseases, including but not limited to human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, hepatitis B, tuberculosis. Thank you. Requires that the school board adopt measures effectively responding to health concerns while respecting the rights of all students, employees, and contractors, including those who are so affected. The purpose of this policy is to adopt such measures. And like all policies, it goes into more the general statement of the policy, students, employees, circumstances, and conditions. Goes into students with special circumstances. You'll see under section D there, it does highlight the school licensed nurse, and then goes through reporting, vaccination and screening, information sharing. So number of different categories, and then has the legal references and the cross references with the policies, other policies. So that is our first policy for first reading, and we have Jason Crane with us. And Jason, just again, could you introduce yourself for the public, and then highlight this policy? Thank you.
Thanks. Jason Crane, Special Education Director. The health offices are within the structure of the Special Education Department to kind of help oversee, hire, and recruit. This policy is needing an update. If you read through some of the policies that will be moving out, they were from like 1995, so they needed a revision. Obviously, this is the Minnesota School Board Association policy. We didn't create the title. It looks a little intimidating, but it really just covers a lot of Minnesota statutes and federal statutes around health and wellness within a school district. So let me just start with that. And do you have specific questions about the content of the policy? If you do, I'd love to address
I think there were some questions, and I'll start with member myself. Thank you.
I am new to the term Team 504. 504 teams. Can you give me a 30-second summary of that?
I can. First of all, Mr. Bonds is our 504 coordinator for the district. And 504, Section 504 is a form of disability support. My own son has a 504 plan. He goes to Carleton schools. And his 504 plan makes an immense difference for him to make progress in his school setting. And it's a plan similar to an IEP plan. IEP plan has goals and objectives. A 504 plan is typically most commonly around something that debilitates a student from being successful in school. For my son, he has epilepsy, he has a seizure disorder, and similar to this policy, it talks about creating structures and supports for students who have an episodic. He has episodes of seizures, and when he has a seizure week, he could have as many as 9, and his schooling is majorly impacted. So 504s address how schools can support students who have the inability to be successful because of a debilitating situation. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you so much.
And just to add, that the questions stem from section 2 under general statement of policy A, students, and that's where it referenced section 5014 process. So if you have a question, kind of point to that so we can follow it. Any other questions on this policy? Okay, go ahead.
So I would be interested in having a little bit more of a discussion on the title, recognizing that it's a very all-encompassing policy when it comes to communicable diseases and infectious conditions, wanting to protect our staff and make sure they're trained to know how to prevent those things for our students. State statute dictates that we also provide some prevention education regarding STIs, sexually transmitted infections. And so I'm looking then at section 2, letter I. And this isn't talking necessarily, so the title of our policy that we have proposed here is students and employees with sexually transmitted infections and diseases and other certain communicable diseases and infectious conditions. When we talk specifically about STIs in this policy, it's not about preventing STIs individually, person to person. It's about educating not only students, but staff and our school board about how to prevent STI transmission in our general lives. And so I just like to have a little bit further conversation about why we're picking out and specifically identifying STIs in the title when those fall under the definition of communicable diseases or infectious conditions. And the mention of it here in our policy is really only about education, not necessarily about district policy on how to prevent these specific infections.
I can address a portion of your question.
Yeah.
Our employee groups, depending upon their job description, first of all, we do a blanket training for all. That includes things like our bloodborne pathogens trainings for all staff. But certain staff, for example, our health office staff, gets additional training on top of that. I imagine the engineering department gets some very customized training on how to clean up messes in our schools, including vomit, blood, and what have you. So job descriptions kind of articulate the additional trainings that each subgroup needs. And if needed, we will always reach out and provide training. And I think part of this policy has to do with our student population too, that we have to have health education curriculum, and we do have health classes at various grade levels, and that's addressing some of the federal statutes about how schools will educate students. I don't know if that addresses all of your questions, Member Microsoft?
No, that's good points to be made. Recognizing that the education that you're speaking of, this policy is embedded then within the employee section of our policy handbook and not necessarily curriculum or students. So I just want to make sure that that it's easy for people to understand what this policy is about and know where to look if they're looking for that information and they're expecting to see that more in a curriculum perspective. So just wanted
the recommendation to consider a name change for the policy.
that. I'm also looking at the note that we have in our model policy about how we're not necessarily required by statute to have a policy addressing these issues, but we are required to have a program that incorporates the STI prevention education piece. So that's just my observation as I read through this. And I'm happy to, have further conversations and can easily sway to do different things.
And so again, we didn't choose the title of this policy. Actually, the policy kind of reads like we do more than we do, meaning that it kind of feels like we draw blood. We draw blood for testing tuberculosis and things like that. And we don't do those things in the school setting. When we need to partner with the Public Health Department, Minnesota Public Health, to do immunization clinics in our schools, it's them doing the drawing of the blood and giving the shots, not the Blue Book schools nursing staff. So we've really scaled back on a lot of things that were considered possibly invasive. I remember doing scoliosis screenings as a young elementary school kids. We're not doing scoliosis screenings any longer in school settings.
I think in terms of the title, I guess I want to maybe check with NSBA about why they decided to go with such a lengthy title before changing it.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to suggest the same thing. I think that it would be important for us to consider why. I mean, it does almost seem like it might be a vestige of the past when there was, more significant new concern about HIV and what does this mean for us, and we better have a policy around it. And I think that it might seem a little insensitive in today's times, but I think we also want to be cautious as we talk with MSBA, because sometimes there might be legal reasons or something that they went with it. So we could seek additional information the committee next month, or in the meantime, if we gain additional information prior.
And I appreciate that we're just bringing it forward when it's not a have to, but a want to, so.
One last comment that Crystal Holker did review the policy. She was invited here tonight. She's on a family vacation. Perhaps she can come next time if this one does need a second meeting, obviously, right?
Yes, this one
It'd
does.
be nice to have a nurse perspective here at the meeting to talk with some questions. But she did review it. She liked the way it read, and she didn't have any recommendations for change when she reviewed it. So just so you know.
So point of clarification, we will seek one guidance on potential name change. But there was a second piece, I want to make sure, was there a second? So we can make sure we capture that.
It was that we have a very student-specific education piece. I guess that it might not necessarily be student-specific, because it's also, we're required to educate staff as well as the school board about STI prevention. And so wondering if this is the best place for it to be housed in our policy handbook. If people are looking for guidance on how we do STI prevention education in our district.
Would that be considered a regulation on how we do it? I mean, is there a regulation piece to this? Just a,
There's not a regulation that's recommended at this time. I was just going to quickly go in, and I think what Excel is referring to is this will end up in the 400 series, right?
mm-hmm.
And we'll take a look at your question.
Correct. We will follow it.
Separation of the student versus the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly we need two policies.
Or have it housed just in more of a curriculum section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed, and I was in an Association of Metropolitan School Districts meeting this morning, and they talked. MSBA is, it seems like they're trending a little bit more towards putting the regulation or procedures in their policies now. And sometimes that is getting a little confusing, because the superintendents meeting were proposing that we give them guidance that we would like to keep them somewhat separate, because if we have procedures mandated in policy, that sometimes gets sticky, and it's harder if you want to, if there's a reason to make a slight procedural change, then you're having to change the policy too. So I think this kind of is.
That makes sense too, because, you know, the regulations can be so district specific, and like this, you know, health related. Is there a public health office close by? Is there, you know, how many nurses are available to do the work? You know, so that's, you know, this is a good example why having a regulation separate than, not this specific one, but just in general. Not so much regulation in the policy, but the policy being more broad, I guess. Okay, any other discussion on this policy? And if we could have Crystal come to the second reading just for any additional questions, that would be great. And Jason, really thank you for being available for this one, and I know you're up for a few others too. Okay, are we ready to move on then? Okay, and again, this one will replace policy 4055 and 4065 and 5130. The next policy is policy 403. Again, this is a new policy, discipline, suspension, and dismissal of school district employees. The purpose of this policy is to achieve effective operation of the school district's programs through the cooperation of all employees under a system of policies and rules applied fairly and uniformly. And then it goes into different areas, and then the legal references, and we have Teresa here to speak towards it. And Teresa, do you want to just again introduce yourself so that you're heard by the public?
Teresa Severance, I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources and Operations. And we bring this policy forward as a new policy. It is a standard MSBA policy, so we didn't add or change anything to it. But particularly because we want to make sure there is something in place that our leadership and our employees can refer to regarding the process and the function and kind of behaviors of what would constitute misconduct. Although this is exhaustive on this policy, it's not all inclusive, of course. I just want to make sure that we have something in documentation that shows kind of what the process is, a fair and equitable across the organization and consistent.
Any questions on this policy?
Yes. First, can you explain, I guess, the distinction between dismissal/termination or discharge of employment? What is that distinction?
I think it's probably just the nomenclature of a policy.
Okay. And then my other question is, this might be I've been trying to figure out how to articulate this question in the right way. It came to me kind of late, so I apologize. It's not a lot of time, but if you could explain misconduct where it pertains to the use of chemical substances and how to navigate employees suffering from disease of addiction.
Certainly. So we do have a separate policy that deals specifically with kind of the process of that in our drug and alcohol policy. From a state of Minnesota perspective, any employee that has a first offense, we always offer before any kind of termination or process like that, we always offer the opportunity for there to be assessment and rehabilitation. So that is our responsibility as the employer to make sure that that employee has resources. Of course, it's not up to us whether they follow through with going through that process, and certainly we will be educating our principals actually in October on reasonable suspicion and some of the things that go along with that. If you feel like someone is having issues, and how do you have those conversations, how do you point them to our EAP, those kind of other resources that can give employees help that they need.
Okay. No, that's it. Thank you.
And I was just looking, and if you could confirm, Teresa, I think some of the employee personnel policies you're referring to in the 400 series is 417 chemical use and abuse, and maybe 418 drug-free workplace, drug-free school. Maybe those might be two that would relate to that question.
Yes, and there actually has been some revisions to the MSBA for those that will be moving forward at another meeting related to the new cannabis laws.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Member Bicasel, and then I'll go to the superintendent.
Member Lefferkamp, which policies did you just quote?
It's in the 400 series, and it would be 417 chemical use and abuse. And I don't have the policy in front of me. I'm just kind of referencing the title and determining that it was one. And then 418, which is drug-free workplace, drug-free school.
Okay, I see the 418 on our policy list, I don't see a 417 yet, so.
And that might be one that she's referencing. I'm
There's
just,
Great.
416, 416 that relates to the testing pieces. And I do think there's still one stuck in the 4,000s that hasn't been, which is one of the ones I think we were working.
Superintendent?
Sure. I just wanted to comment for information for the board and for the public that we go through extensive training with our administrative staff. The Human Resources Department has been putting on for it's a series that we're going through, but we spend time on Tuesday, most of the afternoon, just because we want to make sure that all of our administrators and managers have a common baseline for how situations should be handled, how discipline should be handled, how investigation should be handled, as well as support for people on a professional improvement plan and things of that nature. So we are, as we work to systematize how we do things and as we work to improve our systems, that we identify a scenario that we detect now. And I was really happy with the work of the department.
Thank you for that update. Any other questions or comments on this policy 403? Member Michelson?
I'm just wondering, so I assume that there are are the other policies that deal with employee discipline just embedded currently within our drug and alcohol ones, or I assume you deal with this all the time, so what other guidance is there within the district that we're now putting into policy?
We don't have anything in policy related to discipline. They're under the drug and alcohol, there's kind of testing procedures and then state statute, of course, as I mentioned, related to the opportunity for people to help in that situation. And that was one of the reasons that we thought this policy should be put in place. I have seen it in other districts and it's been in this meeting for quite some time. We should put this in place. And interestingly, we also don't have any reference to these types of things in union contracts. A lot of union contracts do have like a progressive discipline pieces and ours do not. So that was another reason why I wanted to make sure that people understood what the components were of the progressive discipline and kind of what steps to be taken.
I'm glad you brought that up. I checked our contracts too, or at least our teacher contracts when we're prepping for this. And I was curious if we've included any of our other leaders, like from our different employee groups, so that they understand and agree. I don't know if agree is the right word, but like understand that this would be a new process and feel that it's something that they can also get behind while they're trying to reach out to their members.
I haven't. I certainly can. I would say this isn't a new process. This is how we function. We just haven't had a policy before, but I'm happy to send it to the union leadership and let them know that it's in for first reading and then see if they have any concerns with it.
Great, thank you.
Any additional comments? Thank you, Teresa, for bringing this forward for all the reasons that we've discussed already today, and look forward to those additional policies coming forward as well. Thank you. Okay, so those were the two areas of first readings. And again, the next one, here. Sorry, I have a lot of papers. Is 507.5. This is for second reading. We did not have a meeting in July, so our first meeting happened in June. 507.5, school resource officers. We're deleting 1155 police department relationship and 2035 police school liaison officers. Those policies. The purpose of 507.5 is to establish the contractual duties and training requirements of a school resource officer. And we did have a lot of discussion on this in June, particularly related to changes in state statute as well. And one of the notes I just have here is that our contract, which thank you again for sending, Anthony, does not reference the state statutes in the contract that we have, but there is training and understanding when we're reviewing that contract each year. Correct?
That's correct.
In terms of this being the second reading, do people have additional questions? And again, really appreciate a lot of background information that Assistant Superintendent sent out on kind of the processes with our SROs. That I think we're gonna get some updates on in the committee of the whole too, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Follow-up discussion,
Yeah.
for the next hour.
But this is particular to the contractual duties and training requirements. And any questions, member Michael?
Just an observation, it seems as though, Duluth Public Schools, in terms of matching the legislature updates, is ahead of the curve in terms of the duties that our SROs have. The only one that I see that's not currently in our contract is 4 and 5 under contractual duties, is providing advice on safety drills and identifying vulnerabilities in our facilities and safety protocols. But I know from past conversations that they do, have those conversations and participate in those conversations with administration. But in terms of like what's in the contract and what's in this, that was the only piece that I saw like missing in black and white.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And you are correct, they do participate in our emergency operations, drills and training for our staff. So we make sure that any amendments will be brought into a draft of the agreement in a year. Because there's one more year on our school resource officers contract, but any modifications to it, we will make sure it's included going forward.
And I believe it's referenced, it's maybe not as specific to that, but it's referenced in terms of trainings and that they're taking part in already, so, in the contract. Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Thank you.
I was asked today in a community engagement meeting, why do we still have SROs here in the district? No, that's a larger topic. Just want to remind you, they said that they were seeing that we were coming forward with the SRO policy, and I reminded the group that we had involved in a pretty extensive public engagement series with Marnita's table that lasted about a year, because we wanted to make sure that we're having deeper community dialogue around whether or not we're going to have SROs. And since that, there's been quite a bit of work done with contract negotiation to make sure that the contract matches best and better practice of our school resource officers, and then the ongoing evaluation process that we have, I think, that we'll be hearing more about tonight. Those are all factors that have led us to continue that. Just fine for both.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I was going to share that in our committee of the whole, that this process and the boards before you since 2020 when Superintendent Magus and Assistant Superintendent Bonds Canada was one of his first projects was to set up a community engagement process, and then we also the advisory committee, which you'll be speaking about tonight. Lots of pieces were put into place from that community engagement process. So, thank you. Okay, so 507.5. So that was policy for second reading. So we will be voting on that. Now we have a number of policies for review, and many of these policies are state statute changes. I'll highlight a few things that might be different than state statute, but we can review them because they're minor changes, not changes to the context of the policy. And so the first one is policy 401, equal employment opportunity. The purpose of this policy is to provide equal employment opportunity for all applicants for school district employment and school district employees. Then it goes into the general statement of the policy. and then all down to the legal references and cross-references. We last reviewed it in 2019, and mainly with this one are specific name changes, as you can see in what's highlighted in particularly F, in the yellow and then the red. This will be just for review then. Any questions on this policy? Okay. The second one then is policy 802. Disposition of obsolete equipment and material. The purpose of this policy is to provide guidelines for the superintendent to assist in timely disposition of obsolete equipment and material. And again, you'll see at the end, there's a statute change, and we did review this policy and adopted it the last time in 2022. So that's the only change there. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the next one, policy 708, transportation of non-public school students. The purpose of this policy is to address transportation rights of non-public school students and to provide equality of treatment in transporting each student pursuant to law. And we actually had just reviewed this policy and spent time on it this fall in 11/2023. And the main changes here were in 3 places where it said shall and it was changed to must. Under 3 eligibility C, and then under 4 students with disabilities, there were 2 changes to must under A. Any questions or comments on that one? Yes, Member Microsoft?
I was just curious, what the background is for making those wording changes there.
Or state statute?
A legislative change, I can't answer that. They decided to move the words over. The main issue here is that for regular general ed transportation, we must provide transportation to the border within our district for non-public students. We may charge, but now that the non-public needs to pay us if we do go outside of the boundaries. So that's the big change right there. Instead of saying shall, it's must. And with students with special needs, we don't have that must happen. It's not a may. And then again, the non-public site will have to pay for the transportation if it is outside. So there must be a distinction between shall and must.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any additional questions? And just again, we reviewed it back in the fall of 2023, so there's more background discussion you could go to on that when that was reviewed. The next one for review is 615, testing, accommodations, modifications, and exemptions for IEPs, Section 504 plans, and LEP students. The purpose of this policy is to provide adequate opportunity for students identified as having individual education program IEPs, Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504 accommodation plan, 504 plan, or English learner EL needs to participate in statewide assessment systems designed to hold schools accountable for the academic performance of all students. And the change there was the symbol changed to section in the purpose. And then also under definitions, there were definition changes under 3. And then you'll see the legal references, state statute at the end. And we adopted this in 6/2022. Was the last time it was reviewed. Any questions on this one or comments? Thank you. Oh, Member Michelson?
I am looking through this quickly. I believe this is the one that, there may have been, we're on 615, right?
We are on 6:15, yes.
So later on, towards the end of this update, in section 4, the granting and documenting accommodations, modifications, or exemptions for testing, it goes on to say, see chapter 5 of the current procedures manual of the Minnesota assessments and guidelines for administration. And when we go to the procedure manuals of Minnesota assessments, chapter 5 does not have to do with accommodations, modifications, or exemptions. It has to do with something not along that chapter 4 does. So I was curious if someone with better understanding of testing can look to see that. I forget if you looked into that already.
I was going to look into it. I can't remember if I sent a note to MSBA. What I'm thinking is the whole reason for the change of legislative changes was because they were updating the references, and I'm wondering if they just missed changing it to chapter 4. MSBA just to confirm that that was just missed in their redlining.
Okay, thank you.
And I would think if that was the case in terms of just making that change before a meeting, it's a minor change again for review. Any other questions on 6:15? Thank you. Thank you, Patty. I know you were looking at a lot of things today, so thank you. The next one is 604, instructional curriculum. The purpose of this policy is to provide for the development of course offerings for students. Again, the minor changes under 2, general statement of policy, it was changing capitals to lowercase. On H of that same section, it took out charter schools, so it's just the school district may not discriminate against. And then under 3B, it notes about the health standards, and that we will be getting an update from NSBA when we can update line 6 in terms of the state health standards, which may take up to 18 months. And then there were some state statutes under the legal references. So any comments or questions on 604? And just also a reminder, we did review this policy back in February and March and adopted it 3/2024. So these are updates that came from the legislative session. So we had discussion on this back then as well. Any questions or comments? Okay. And then, and we had a really good discussion of that one, I remember, back in February and March. The next policy then is 521, student disability non-discrimination. The purpose of this policy is to protect students with disabilities from discrimination on the basis of disability and to identify and evaluate learners who, within the intent of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504, need services, accommodations, or programs in order that such learners may receive a free, appropriate public education. And so you'll see that under Section 2, General Statement of Policy, there was an added who is protected, and then a state under legal references, state statute update. And then any questions on this one, 521? And Anthony's name is on that one as the coordinator, if people have questions. Thank you. And then the last,
Sorry. just noticing that the address that we have in our coordinator under Mr. Bond's name is the right site road.
Thank you.
That's why we have all eyes on this. Thank you. The next one is 524.1R, and this is regulations. And again, regulations are really informational for us. And this is a new policy, or new regulation. Artificial intelligence presents significant opportunities to enhance K through 12 education by providing innovative tools for educators to ensure the ethical, secure, and effective use of AI within Duluth Public Schools. This regulation outlines guidelines for district staff, and I appreciated the note at the end that it was a collaborative effort putting this documentation up, and I think we have someone here, a couple people who can speak towards this. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. As you come, if you
Yeah.
can introduce yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. While you're getting yourself set up, I just want to say that I'm really pleased with the ability for the district to move forward with this policy. We, as you know, we're trying to make sure that our students are 21st century ready, as well as our staff. They have the resources that they need to do the very best they can in the classroom, and we believe AI offers a lot of opportunities for innovation as well as efficiency, not only within the classroom, but also outside the classroom, in office spaces and other places as well. So I'm pleased that our technology department is here to present that. And Jimmy, if you would introduce yourselves and share why we entered into this.
Hi, my name is Mark Smith, Technology Manager. And Peter Graves, the Educational Technology Coordinator. So we looked at different AIs. We heard a lot from staff regarding access to AI. And we looked at a bunch of different AIs in the past. And we looked at Google, because it integrates with our system. And they are looking at having a secure and private service eventually. Right now, we do have additional paid license that do offer that privacy and security. But the one time when they supposed to have that, they promised that 2 months ago. They said it's in the works. So we're hoping that will allow all staff to use this AI in a private, closed campus.
So there is training that goes along with this, and we are inviting this for staff this year. So for all staff, teachers, and everybody else, the training that's involved in it is to make them aware of the advantages that they have with AI and the responsibility that they have for using AI on the work site. There is comment areas for them, and there also is a quiz at the end so that they can demonstrate that they are understanding of these things. And there's 2 levels of where we're at as far as the platform goes. Google Gemini is the platform that we chose. The first is the basic chat bot or chat model that they can plug in different cues or references, and then it comes back with information. That one goes into a larger learning model. I'm getting kind of technical, but basically we have to be more careful with that as far as our data privacy. We don't want to be putting stuff in and having that get into this big conglomerate. The paid version of it is more secure, and Google has been talking about getting the first version to be more data secure. So we're rolling out in a kind of a slowish kind of model with it. We want to make sure that we're careful with it. But on the flip side, we also realize that our students are using it. The community uses it, and if our teachers aren't having the ability to use it, then it makes it more difficult for them to actually use it with their students. So this regulation gets put into place just to kind of give that information of the pros and cons, not the cons, the pros and the responsibilities that we have, or just so that we have something to talk about. We started rolling out training. There will also be training that will come into actual specific use of the Google Gemini, but that's
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to also think you indicated this, but just clarify that we are starting AI Gemini use for this year. We'll take the opportunity to do a lot of learning and then consideration for students next year. So this first year is for
Great, thank you. I'm glad you touched on the training. That was one of my main questions. I'm just wondering, Anthony and John, in your talks with other school districts, where they're at with similar regulation around AI. I know there's been a lot of discussion on the NSBA
I think it's.
updates.
Different districts are in a variety of places, of course. I think that we are, I wouldn't say that I would say that we're kind of in the middle of the pack to some extent. I think we would be more forward on this if our budgets were more robust and our staffing. We all know we work very hard on that technology referendum, and if we had some more resources, we might have been further effective with the AI efforts. But I also know that we've always tried to go into things with a sense of making sure that we're thinking, but also ensuring the safety and security of our district and our data, and also making sure that our policies and procedures are reflective of that, so that we're not putting kids or data in jeopardy. So I would say that other districts that have similar policies or similar policies, and I also really respect the balance that we've struck between making sure that we're embracing new tools with as well. So that we're keeping people safe. I don't know if that plays out where we're at. I think that's kind of what I've seen from the district.
Thank you. Any other questions? Member Michelson?
Thank you for your work and being back here in the summertime here. Just trying to wrap my brain around how we currently don't allow students to use AI. In some cases, if they do use AI and it's discovered, they are feeling great. Recognizing that the reasons and the uses that our staff use it for will be for improving education, but just trying to make sure that we're having that transparent conversation of staff are able to use it, but students at this time are not. And if they are in the future, it'll be, I assume, under very different, or there'll be guardrails in how they use it. Yeah, just bringing up, we don't allow our students to use it, but we're encouraging our staff to use it under these guidelines. Second point I wanted to make is if we could feed this back into Google Gemini and ask them to put it into our standard format of regulations with Roman numerals and all the subdivisions, and that kind of a thing.
Can give it a try.
I just had a question, just out of curiosity, how many AI tools were looked at before Google was chosen? And that's just curious.
There was a couple different vendors that approached me on what they did as far as tools go. And there also was some independents, you mentioned like ChatGPT and things like that. Those were looked at, but those were outside of what we currently have with Google. We have some flexibility on how we can control some of the environment that's around it. And that's a pretty big selling point to it. With the other ones, we don't. They would have a cost. I don't believe the version that we're going to use is going to have a cost, and hopefully they improve with the data on it before it gets into maybe the students' hands. It'll be probably a good thing. We have a couple vendors, and they all have good products.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Peter and Bart, for being with us. Thank you. Okay, so that is the policy agenda for August. All of these will be on the consent agenda at our regular school board meeting. And then the last item we have, which we again generally do in August, is we at the start of our year is we just have a summary of the policies that we either adopted, updated, or reviewed between July 1st, 2023, and then June 30th, 2024. And again, I want to thank Patty for putting this together. It goes through the different series, we have 9 policy series, and which ones underneath them that we did those things in. There were 45 policies, and I just really appreciate that we really were ahead of the game on a number of policies, such as under the 600 series, where we had great discussion and a lot of work done by staff on 604, the instructional curriculum, the textbooks and instructional materials, and 606.5 library materials. And again, a number of other policies. So just great work, and really can't thank Patty enough, who reviews a lot of the old 1000 series and does a lot of the work to get the policies on our updated before bringing them to us. And I think we've done an excellent job this year. 45 policies is a lot to have worked on. And so, Superintendent Magus, you want to say some comments as well?
Sure. No, I'm just really grateful for this committee, the dedication that you show, the attention to detail, and the both the depth and scope of work that we've been able to accomplish with this committee, as well as the previous policy committee. And I would also say that the work is being recognized, not just in the district, but we've had a number of other districts adopt various policies that we've crafted. And I think that we've also been a forward-thinking light in this region, as far as some of our policies related to equity and gender inclusion and other things. I'm particularly proud that the Minneapolis public schools was looking to our gender inclusion policy to adopt. We're looking at the metro area for some things there. That for us to be forward-thinking and make sure that we have these policies in place shows the power of policy creation by governance.
Thank you. I also just want to make sure it gets recognized, and I know Anthony and John, you're in front of our staff in the next few weeks in a lot of ways. So just thanking, so many of these policies come to us with many committees and much staff work, and such as Peter and Bart and Teresa and other staff, Jason. So just really greatly appreciate all of the additional time that our staff helps bring these policies forward, bring the regulations, the actual practices of the policies of our district forward. And so please share that as well.
Thank you, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention our staff that's been supporting that. And in particular, I would also mention Executive Assistant Paquette, who has been just a model of efficiency in what she's been doing in policy, particularly in the past year.
We did not get to 45 of them. A lot of work on Patty's part. And bringing, bringing forth the policies for review right now, particularly the legislative changes. These changes were just confirmed the end of May, and so to quickly bring so many of them forward with the new state statutes, it was just great, and look forward to, I know there's a few more that will be brought forward because of state statute changes of this past May. So we can look forward to that as well. Any other comments? I would ask our new board members, one of the things that we want you to think about is just if you have some thoughts on ways we're getting information to you. Workbook gets to you on Friday. It's really helpful when you have a chance to look at these right away and get any questions to our team, which is Patty, John, Anthony, myself, so that we can try and get the questions answered before this meeting or get the right staff in front of us if you have further questions, as I've talked with you guys about before. But is there any other comments you'd want to make right now in terms of making this helpful to you before we review policies? A lot of resources on the NSBA side too, of course.
Sorry for being so challenging. One thing that I really appreciated, especially like we've been getting lots of questions and kind of just really helpful. Even if it's with, sometimes there's opportunity far ahead of time, but sometimes there's opportunity a little closer, and even knowing just before meeting, so
Yeah.
that we can bring people on. It's really helpful. I'm thankful for that. And I would also say that one thing I've heard from many members at times is that you might need to schedule a little more time or a little bit more between this meeting and the meeting afterwards, just because we have been so ambitious with our agendas that it's hard sometimes to do this many policies with just an hour. So we might need to give that some thought or think about a different day or something like that too. So just something that could come up via conversations.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then we can wrap up our policy meeting, and then we'll be starting our committee of the whole. And I think our board chair will do this, but I just want to acknowledge we have our new education reporter here. If you'd like to just stand up for a minute and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Claudia Gupta, I'm the education reporter for the Duluth Tribune. I just graduated from UC Berkeley in May, and I'm very excited to be here and excited to get to know all.
Well, excellent, welcome, and it was great reading your background. And Terry, you've been doing a great job, and we really have appreciated all the stories you've covered for us in your role as education reporter as well. So, thank you. Okay, meeting is adjourned.